Welcome to another episode of Side Part. I'm Nikki, your host, and today I am just ridiculously excited because Bex is back and we are doing the ACOTAR deep dive. Welcome, Bex.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
I am so excited when she agreed to do this. So we briefly mused in her previous episode that we would potentially do an ACOTAR episode. I have one better. We are doing a 4-part ACOTAR deep dive. The first episode is going to be ACOTAR, the second one, ACOMAF, the third, ACOWAR, and then the fourth will mainly be A Court of Silver Flames with a touch on Frost and Starlight. I am just so excited, but I will say we are not well versed in theories. Anything that we do say, if we have unknowingly taken it from somewhere else, please let us know so we can credit them in the caption. It's going to be kind of chaotic, but we like it that way. Bex, how are you feeling? You ready?
I'm good. I'm so excited. And yes, I'm so appreciative that you said that. There are so many theories out there in the ACOTAR world, and it is exhausting to try to keep up with all of them. So we have reread and come up with some theories that we would like to talk about. If there are theories that already exist, just know that there's something that we thought of in the reread, and like Nikki said, please credit that person to where the credit is due.
Absolutely. Now, before we actually dive into the book itself, I know when I finished ACOTAR, I was feeling different than I ever thought I would. We all know, I've talked about it enough. This book was the thing that got me out of my postpartum slump. And it's one of the things we bonded over, was that this kind of saved us in a really tough postpartum season.
Yes. Yeah, I think it sounds really dramatic to say ACOTAR changed my life, but it did. And so I was kind of nervous to reread the series in general, because I actually got a tattoo about it, which makes me so nervous. And I had not reread since getting the tattoo. And I was worried that I would reread and feel a little bit like, oh, this isn't as good as I remember, or I don't know, just insecure about my choice to do that. And that was not my experience at all. I was rereading and I'm like, wow, this is just chef's kiss. It's so good.
I absolutely. And I will not claim that ACOTAR is my favorite book out of the series, but there was something so nostalgic. This is my first reread, and going back, I had a way different lens on it. And a couple of my opinions changed, especially about Tamlin. And we'll get into that as we dive into the episode, but I'm really excited. Let's get started. I'm going to set the scene. We have Feyre living in a dilapidated cottage. Her family fell from the high echelon of society. Her mother passed away. Feyre is shouldered with this responsibility of taking care of her family while being the youngest of 3 sisters. Her mother is gone. Her mother's dying breath, she made her vow to take care of her family, which is wild to me, that she didn't ask her husband. But when you unpack it a little bit, there's a lot going on within these family dynamics. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I had never really given a whole lot of thought to the mother, actually. I am really curious to know who she is. I'm just completely beside myself that we don't have more information about her, really, other than this. I don't know. I have never thought a whole lot about it. I do think it's weird that she didn't ask her husband. And also, I would have almost assumed that that would have gone to Nesta, but maybe her mom just saw something in Feyre. Maybe she thought that Feyre was the only one that would learn how to take care of the family. I don't know. I really don't know why it would have been on her alone.
Well, when you're a therapist, you view characters a little bit differently. And what I think is so interesting about what Miss Mass did is she had every person at family conceptualizing grief differently and moving at a different place in the grieving process. And if you know anything about the grieving process, it's not cyclical. There's not a start and finish. You kind of stay in a place, maybe move to another place, then you come back around again. And so Nesta's very much in that rage, just F you to the world. Yeah. Elaine dissociates and is just in her own world. Her dad just shut down completely, in every which way. And then Feyre is almost overcompensating by trying to shoulder all the responsibility to make it okay for everyone. She doesn't even check in with herself. I think we see to like halfway through this story, where she's like, well, maybe I'm not okay. We really see that when she starts getting back in tune with like art, that she's like, that guilt creeps in and like a lot of those feelings. And it's just really interesting as a therapist to look at this family dynamic in the wake of grief and loss, not only with their mother, but even their financial station. And I'm like, well done, Miss Mass. And I did not think of that my first read through, because I was going through my own stuff at the time. I was like, oh, what a nice book. I'm like, oh, it's so interesting.
It really is. I've never actually thought about it in that way because I don't have like a therapeutic background. But it is really interesting that you bring that up.
And that's just where my mind goes.
Yeah. The thing that I was always just really in tune with was Feyre's depression. And I don't think that that's something that's like talked a lot about, just like truly how depressed Feyre was. I mean, I think it's page 4. Our introduction to Feyre is she's hunting in the woods and she realizes that she doesn't remember the last time that she viewed things in like a creative way. She doesn't remember the last time she enjoyed like color and light and shadows. And that's like our introduction to her, is that she's like deeply depressed and just like trying to make it. And yeah, it's because
and
of
also in like the depths of trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's because of the promise. And I don't know what, I guess I'm confused. Did the sisters also know that that was the mom's like last request of Feyre? So are the sisters like, well, this was what she wanted for Feyre, but not for us, so we're going to rely on Feyre? Or did they not know and Feyre just took it upon herself because of it?
Okay, so do you remember when she's leaving to go under the mountain to rescue Tamlin? Yes. Nesta tells her not to combat, essentially like kind of saying like everything's going to be fine here, and kind of giving that permission to leave, like don't come back, we're fine. And part of me wonders if Nesta was aware, because like almost like Feyre needed to hear that. And maybe I took that the wrong way, but I don't feel like we ever got a clear answer on that. But some part of me has to believe that Nesta was not clueless. Maybe Elaine, but I don't feel like we give Elaine enough credit sometimes too.
I don't think we do. And I was paying close attention to kind of the relationship with the sisters. And we really don't get a lot about Elaine at all. The one thing that I highlighted was that Elaine, well, at least about Elaine, was that Elaine was the one who gave Feyre the paints in the first place. And that was like pretty much all that I got from Elaine in this book. And I do think that was so interesting because like Elaine saw that quality in Feyre and was trying to like be a gardener to her sister, like keep that part of her alive and keep it watered and growing, but it just like wasn't translating into the needs of the family. But it was also like Feyre's biggest release at that time. So it's kind of all I noted about Elaine in this book. But Nesta, I don't know. What did you think about Elaine and Nesta's perspective in general? I had a different viewpoint this time than when I read it the first time.
You know, the fact that Nesta wasn't impacted by Tamlin's glamour. So I feel like in the first book, I was like, oh, he must have missed something. But I think this is indicative of like how powerful one, Nesta is, but also two, some part of me wonders if there's some sort of like Fae blood go like somewhere down their line. Yes. I have questions because I'm like, there's just so many things. And even how connected she is to Rhys, the fact that he's her mate, and we find that out obviously in ACOMAF. I just don't feel like, maybe Cauldron will correct me, right? But like, I just feel like the Cauldron wouldn't connect Rhys with someone that necessarily wasn't a fit for him. And I just feel like, I don't know. I have lots of questions about that. And I'm not saying this articulately enough, but yeah.
No, I do wonder about that. And I also wonder like, okay, so we have 3 sisters here and like series spoilers, I guess, but like Cassian and Nesta obviously are mates, and then Feyre and Rhys, and then Elaine and apparently Lucian, but like who knows what's going to happen there. But
right. And you just have to believe there's something more. Yeah.
Yeah. You're telling me all 3 of them like all three of those like fae and like a high lord had human mates. I'm
Two High Lords,
what?
technically. Well, like,
Oh yeah,
not that we're interested in Feyre, right? And then
yeah.
even Lucian's a very powerful royal high fae. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he denounced his title, but still.
Still,
And then,
and so I don't know. I'm just so curious to see, and also like, so the dad. It's early on in the book. There's like kind of a hint that there were maybe word marks like painted on the door, or that he was carving them into the door. And I'm like, okay, that's probably one of
so
the
there's
only
two
moments
places
in
I
this
saw
book.
that, right?
Okay.
One was like when the dad and like the people in the village would have the markings on their door to like repel creatures away. And I was like, are those word marks? But also, do you remember when she's in the library
Yes,
at Tamlin's estate, and there's that image of the cauldron, and there's those little tiny like ancient fae-like markings, but nothing she's ever seen before. I'm like, that could just be their ancient fae language, or is it word marks?
I know, and so
I don't know.
I'm curious because obviously this has many like connotations to other series of hers, but I'm like, okay, and who? If he was carving word marks into the door, like who was his wife, and I don't know. I'm so curious about their mother, and I don't know if we'll get more about her, but I kind of hope we do, and just kind of their backstory a little bit more.
Well, and she's kind of like she was such an integral part into forming Feyre's identity. Like this burden that she bared, her kind of her identity as a caretaker, like this, not martyr, but this person that's willing to sacrifice themselves for everybody else. Maybe that is a martyr, but her willingness to throw herself in the line of fire all the time for the greater good. Like, yeah, I just feel like that started with her mom tasking her to sacrifice what she wants so her family can be okay. Sorry, Mama Archeron, we're really leaning in hard, but I don't agree with your decision.
It was a lot to ask. I don't know. And I have heard the rumor that some people believe that Feyre is an unreliable narrator.
Because every other series she writes is in third person. ACOTAR is the only series that's written in first.
It's so interesting to me. I don't know. I just relate to Feyre so much that I really can't talk about her without getting like emotions intertwined, because I just like really, really see her journey. And I think I have like proudly stated that across my social media. And I cannot imagine like being given that task. And then, yeah, I mean, that kind of developed, like you said, her entire like martyr identity, I guess. Like she really is kind of just like self-sacrificing herself to, I don't know, make sure everyone else is okay. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to read, if I'm honest. Like the writing is beautiful, but just knowing that that's kind of the place that she's in at that time is kind of sad.
Well, and I think like that is the emotions you're supposed to be feeling at the beginning of the book. It's really sad. They're very destitute. And then she murders this fae-like wolf. She thought maybe it could be a fairy, but not likely. Skins the pelt, and then, Tam comes on in and, doesn't kill them, but demands she come with him as payment for, slaying one of his, was he a sentry or someone in his inner court?
Yeah. Andrus is such an interesting, he is very interesting to me because he knew, obviously, when he was crossing the wall, like what he was going into. And throughout the book, whenever Feyre gets to Prythian, we realize how many things like Tamlin, Lucian, and Alice say to try to like make sure that she is meeting the requirements of the treaty, but also trying to give her pieces of information. I think it was at one part in the book, Alice like tries to comfort Feyre almost, and she says like Andros knew what he was going to face when he crossed the wall. He knew there would be trouble. Yeah. And I was like, oh, Alice is like telling her without like telling her. She's trying to tell her. And Feyre had no idea.
Yeah. But we see that humanness come out in Feyre. She doesn't know this at the time, but when the Fae with the wings that are cut off from Amarantha, and she doesn't know it's Amarantha, she just knows some evil person has done this to this Fae, and she holds his hands while he's dying and doesn't let go even well after he passes. Mm-hmm. And after that, she apologizes to Tamlin for slaying Andras. I think I'm saying that right. And that moment to me was so pivotal because it was the moment she really felt remorse for what she did. And even though I don't think she was wrong for doing it in the first place, right? She's just a girl trying to survive. Right. We can get past that, but I feel like that was a big moment for her and Tamlin in this story too.
Huge. It was completely pivotal. It not only proved that the first half before that happens, Lucian kind of eggs her on and teases her to say you hated him, didn't you? You hate us all. And when you read it back, knowing what you know, it's Lucian is making sure that she hated fairies, because if she didn't, then she would negate the treaty. So he's
because at the end we find out though that the way to break the curse was Tamlin had to find someone who hated fairies, and then make them fall in love with him. Now, I think that's interesting because it wasn't that they had to fall in love. It was make them fall in love with him, correct?
I think so. I think that was it. He didn't have to love her back.
Okay. We're jumping around so much and I love it, but can we talk about Tamlin's Heart of Stone? We hear it mentioned once from Lucian that, man, you have a heart of stone, but it's softening lately. And then when the last trial, when she's under the mountain, she stabs Tamlin in the heart because she remembers it's the heart of stone. Yeah. And I just don't feel like we get enough information about that other than that. It's just fact. He has a heart of stone.
Yes. So the heart of stone situation, was that part of the curse? Or has he always had a heart of stone? Or that would make zero sense. Why would he have been born with a heart of stone? But it's not ever really specified that Amarantha cursed him and gave him a heart of stone with the curse.
Are we missing something? I feel like it was just,
I don't know.
I wish I knew. But so let's talk about that. Because a lot of people, there's a lot of discourse around did Tamlin really love her in this book?
Yeah.
I'm going to let you go first. I know you have some thoughts. I want to hear them.
I do. I have very opinionated thoughts. And I think it all goes back to, it depends on what your definition of love is. But I'm not going to lie, reading this book, I realized what I didn't want, how I show love to be. I didn't want to be someone who doesn't educate someone that they love, who locks them in the house, who doesn't encourage them to grow. And I don't know, I am I'm so nervous to admit it. I'm people, please be kind. I'm one of the believers that Tamlin never loved Feyre until after Under the Mountain. I do think he developed feelings for her after she did what she did and she died for his people, and then he tries to marry her or whatever. But I don't think during this book he loved her, and that I think is confirmed in ACOTAR. But I don't know, when you're reading it, it just, knowing what you know and you're reading it back, everything he says, everything that he spins his way, the way that he talks about her humanity, he speaks about her humanity in such a negative way, and the Spring Court speaks about humanity in such a negative way, and I'm could you ever love something that you don't respect and that you're not willing to change your opinion on? So he detested humans and he thinks they're ignorant, and he makes fun of her for being illiterate, uses it as an insult. Yeah. But then could you ever love something that you don't respect? I don't think you can, but maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I have lots of thoughts on that and none of them bad. I don't disagree. But there were points, I remember when Faye was in his library and she was trying to write down words she didn't recognize. And, you know, she was trying to educate herself independently. And I know he offered to try to help her.
Yes.
But his approach was all wrong. And I just feel like, so he took all those words that, remember she wrote this list that he took of words that
Yes.
she didn't recognize. And then he made the poems with them.
Yes.
Do you remember that? Okay.
I do. And yeah.
So that was cute and all, but I really feel like, obviously I don't want to go too much in ACOMAF with like her and Reese's journey, but
yeah,
there's a once or twice for sure where he said, I just want you here painting safe. I just want to know where you are and know you're safe. That's all I want from you.
Yes.
And now maybe that's his conceptualization of love, right? Like, I care about enough about you that I want to keep you away and I want to keep you safe. And honestly, there's a lot of toxic relationships like that, right? Where like, it's all about control. Cause like, I don't feel good, right? So I want to make sure you're good because I can't even handle one more thing being out of place in my life.
Yeah.
If that's the case, like, I mean, I can vibe with his reasoning. Like, okay, I see how you got there. I just don't agree with it.
Yeah.
Like, I guess maybe as a therapist in me, like understanding like his frame of reference, like, okay, I see your line of thinking. I just don't know if that's healthy in a relationship. Combining someone to a house, not trusting their ability to regulate their own body is problematic. And I think we see this, like, we can kind of like summarize her entire experience at the spring court, but some positive things that happen, you know, Tamlin's like, well, there's one point where he's like, what do you like to do? And she just says, I don't know. Right. She couldn't answer him. I can find out. Let me think, what chapter was that? I don't know. They're like sitting, is it at dinner? And he goes, what do you like to do? And,
Lucian makes fun of her at that moment and is like, so human of you to not have hobbies. And again, that was a moment that I was like, wow, again, they are like throwing humanity at her as an insult. And I don't know. One thing that was really interesting reading like Tamlin's character was how many opportunities he had to tell Feyre like what her true worth is, and he didn't. So she would, once the tides kind of started turning and she was like, wow, you're a high lord and your attention is falling on me, like I don't deserve this. I mean, almost every chapter there was a moment where he could have been like, yes, you do, like you do deserve like real food and like shelter and safety, but you also deserve like love and joy and happiness. And he not once, like never was like, you are deserving of this. He almost like kept inflating his ego based on her being like, oh, it's so amazing. You're such a powerful high lord that's paying attention to me. Like, so kind of you. And he almost like goaded into that and was like, yeah, you're right. So kind of me. Like, you think I'm great. And I just don't know that that's love. Like, if I ever looked at my husband and was like, man, I'm just like so not worthy of you and I don't deserve love or I don't deserve your attention, he would be like, what are you talking about? Like, yes, you do.
Do I think Tamlin loved her? I think I have a two-part answer. I think first, I do believe that Tamlin believed he loved her.
Okay.
According to his own definition, right? Because a lot of times he talks about like, I just want to make sure you're safe. You're here. You're literally just doing what I want you to do. I don't want you wanting anything else. I just want you here and safe and locked in my house, essentially. Like that would make me feel good. And a lot of it is revolving around control. But also with the assumption that she shouldn't want more than that. I'm giving you everything you want because I love you. You should be happy. You should be grateful. That should be enough. Right. And obviously we find out it's not enough, but I do think in book one, it was enough for Feyre. Feyre is, I mean, homegirl's traumatized. She lived her whole life in fight or flight, pure survival. So if you think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you can't even get to a place of reasoning like who you are, what you want, when your main like when you have to think about food and survival. If your basic needs are not met, you can't even begin to conceptualize love, belonging, acceptance. Like, all those are pieces that people who are fed and safe can. I mean, we literally know that trauma transforms the brain. And from someone who's highly traumatized, sometimes it just feels good to know that you're loved. And I just truly don't know if I believe that Feyre was really told, I love you, very often prior to Tamlin saying it when he sent her away. And I think I'm wondering if it was such a shock to hear that out of someone's mouth. Like, that's what kind of propelled her forward to go rescue him, because, like, how often has she heard that? It must have meant a lot to her. Yeah.
Yeah, it must have. And again, though, it begs the question of, like, did he mean it? And I don't know if he meant it. It's so hard when you know what you know and you reread the book. It is really hard to not view him. I view him, honestly, as kind of like a villain. Like, I am not team, like, redemption arc, which I just think, I don't want him to be, like, miserable, but I also don't want this grand story where he comes back and, like, is redeemed. I just think, like, I don't know. Do I believe he loved her? No. Do I believe that he was desperate? I think that, like, sometimes desperation can be, like, almost painted over as love or mistaken as love. And I think he was desperate to do whatever he needed to do for his people. But I don't know if he actually, like, loved her. Even, like, sending her away after keeping her kind of in the home the whole time. Like, there is a little bit of a tactic to that, right? I don't know.
We do know that Rhys knows that she's his mate, like, almost instantly, right? Like, he was drawn to her. Yeah. But do you remember when he unglamours her in Tamlin's dining room and he's like, mind reads Feyre and says she could have been perfect for you? Do you remember when he says that?
Yes.
Part of me was like, is it because is it because Rhys sensed that Feyre already cared for him? That she already had?
I think Rhys, like, could tell that Feyre would have been the one to break the curse. But that implies, like, when you're reading it the first time, it implied, like, she could have been the one for you. Like, perfect, you could have lived happily ever after. But then when you read it and you know what you know, like, she could have been the one for you. Yeah, to, like, break the curse. Not necessarily, like, for you.
Well, and then I get really testy about the surreal, just stay with the High Lord. And it's like, I just have a hard time believing that this creature could not specify which High Lord. I will die on this hill. There was no reason. She made it sound like Tamlin. I don't care what anyone says. That surreal was not specific at all.
It's interesting because I wonder, like, Lucian sent her off to capture the cereal, right? And Lucian was kind of playing, like, the whole time, like, he was throwing breadcrumbs. And I just wonder, like, Tamlin could not be the one to reveal to her the treaty, but was Lucian allowed to if, like, a Suriel did it? And so is that why he set her up?
Or he knew that the Suriel was not impacted by Amarantha and could give her the answer she wanted because they were all bound by Amarantha's magic and couldn't say anything.
Yes. And then I also wonder, like, okay, so then Tamlin later on, obviously we know, like, starts to keep her in the house, and he says it's like there's a threat of all these dangerous things and blah, blah, blah. But, like, did he keep her in the house because he loved her, or did he keep her in the house because he knew that she could go, like, find information outside of the house that he did not want her to have?
Yeah. Well, and okay, there were moments where I didn't hate Tamlin. Like, I'm going to be honest. I was a big Tamlin stan after the first book before reading book 2. I'll be the first to admit it. I'm wrong sometimes, most times. But there was that moment where I think Tamlin literally calls it his old haunt, but it was like this glen with this pool filled with starlight. And this is where we really see Feyre open up to Tamlin. But it was not lost on me that pool was a pool of starlight, and that's where she felt really comfortable and just like almost like it was impacting her on like a soul level way. And I'm like, the themes of starlight and night and just feeling, even when she's looking at that painting or the mural in the library and she's like drawn to the night court. And don't get me wrong, like throughout this whole story, the night court's like portrayed as very villainous, but at the same time, anything associated with stars and night, it just brings her comfort. And so I definitely noticed it on my reread. I did not notice that before.
On my first read, I liked Tamlin until Under the Mountain. And then I was like, okay, this guy's not here for him. But I think this was like my fifth or something reread at this point. And I mean, at this point, I'm like, each time I reread, I start to think less and less that he loved her. And I start to think more and more that it was like selfish intent.
Or more possessiveness, like even during Calamai.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
like he was very, I mean, and I know like with the right, it was more like something took over him and whatever, but it was more about possession. I felt like not like I cared about you, but like I would have taken you. It was not the vibe.
Yeah. No.
And then the first time I read it, I thought it was like, oh, that's, I'm like, ew, no. Like,
one thing that I noticed about Tamlin that I just, I can't get over is the amount of times that Feyre, like once she starts to develop feelings for him, like the amount of times that she is like dogging on herself and is like, oh, the paintings aren't that good, or I don't deserve your attention. And she kind of puffs his ego to be like, you are an all-powerful high lord. Like, I don't deserve your attention, or I don't deserve your kindness, or like the safety or the food that you're giving me. Like, I'm so undeserving. And I truly believe she doesn't think she is, but that was a moment where Tamlin, in my opinion, like if he loved her, would have been like, no, you do deserve attention, and you do deserve like basic human needs and necessities like shelter, food. And not only that, but you deserve love and joy and happiness, and like you deserve all of it. And instead of taking those moments to like tell her her worth, he like took them and was like, you're right, I am an all-powerful high lord and you are just a human. And I don't think that is love in any way. And the more you read it, the more I'm like, oh, it just makes me feel a little sick. I can't imagine like in like the real world, and I know this is fake, but like in the real world, if someone spoke to someone like that, where someone was like, I'm so undeserving, and their partner was like, you're right, I'm so powerful, we would all be like, run for the hills. Like, what?
Well, okay. During my second reread, the thing that was truly unforgivable was Tamlin's insistence on playing a part on the mountain. And okay, so did Rhys. Rhys played a part too, but he did it in her favor and found a way to help Feyre and still live within what he was doing. And the only time Tamlin interacted with her was to try to bone in like a closet or whatever. Like that to me, unforgivable. It's like the guy that calls you at 3 a.m. but doesn't text you all day. That's the vibes it was giving. I'm sorry. That to me, even when I read the first time, I was like, oh.
Yep. That is where it lost me the first time. And like just the straight up, like lack of emotion, the cool, calm, collected guys that she's like, when she sees Lucian, she's like, whatever spell he's under. And Lucian's like, he's not under a spell. And she's like, oh, what? But there is a moment where that guise is like lifted, and it was whenever Lucian was like in danger. He freaks out at some point. I'm not exactly sure the exact moment, but he loses his grip on that one time, and it was for Lucian. It was not for Feyre. And I'm like, so he does, like, he can lose that cool. And Taylor Swift's song "You're Losing Me" just like is replaying in my head, like, lose something, babe, risk something, I've got nothing.
Well,
like, help
I
me
feel like
out.
people critique Reese for some of the stuff he had her do, like dance drunk on fairy wine and would paint her. And he would touch her, but part of me wonders if he put the paint on her so he could know if anyone else was touching her, so he could keep her safe.
Yes.
And that was always the I mean, I love Reese, we all know it. Even though Cassian is my number one, but I don't know. There's so many things reading it the second time, it gives me the chills, like how much he was truly trying to save her under the mountain. And obviously it's because it's his mate. And we know for sure that he feels something, at least by the end of the book, when, you know, they have that final meeting after Tam whisks her away after coming back from the dead to go shag. And you're just like, okay, weird. But the fact that they can mind speak, and I know Reese can enter the minds of like everyone, but I just feel like they've had this connection in that story that I didn't realize how powerful it was in ACOTAR.
Yeah. I have to disclaim that everything that I say about Reese is like rose-colored glasses. Like, the man can do no wrong.
Same.
I know that there are like a lot of arguments about him, especially in Court of Silver Flames.
I have one major flaw with him when we get to like A Court of Silver Flames that like I feel like he's unforgivable, but
okay. I'm like, the man can do no wrong. I don't care. Like, I don't know, but it is interesting, like reading the shadow imagery, even at the beginning. So when Feyre like pulls the arrow back and is looking at Andrus at the beginning, and she's like, do I shoot him? Should I shoot him? There's this sentence where it says, like, it almost feels like a shadow is watching me, and like I can feel a shadow watching me. And I'm like, that was Reese. That was Reese. Oh my God. He, like, at the very beginning, he was watching all this like happen. That, like, I don't know. There's so many moments throughout the book where she's like, I feel that presence of like a shadow watching me. And I'm like, it's because he can see you. Like, he's like literally picturing you. It's happening. Like,
even like the lever situation when he like goes into her, like he was like zapping her when she's going to pull the wrong lever. At no point did Tamlin try to intervene. He knew homegirl couldn't read. He knew. Yeah. And he's just like, we'll see how this one shakes out. Like, what? You know, she can't read. And you're just going to like, oh, she picked 33% odds. I think we'll be all right. Like, what?
Tamlin did not bet on her. Let's like remember that everyone bet, and Tamlin did not even bet on her. And I'm like, that's devastating.
I think he was resigned to just see her go. He was like, this is my fate. I'm here, ready to witness it.
Yeah.
That was it.
It's really interesting. One of the lines that just continuously goes through my head when I think about this book is at the beginning, again, when she's hunting, she like obviously shoots Andrus, and then she reaps the consequences. Tamlin shows up, and she says, like, I would rather die with my head held high than like crawling like a cowering worm. And I was like, because that's what you turned like the worm into. Like, you took on the worm. It's the worm. She literally at the beginning, yeah.
Didn't you picture like a giant worm? Like,
I pictured just a big Alaskan bullworm that just takes over the town.
And then like, you look up a worm.
Yeah.
But it's terrifying. Like,
it is.
I had to Google it because I was like, there's no way it's just like a giant guarded worm just slopping through the soil.
It's like a dragon kind of looking snake dragon thing. But I was like,
snake dragon that chooses to live underground. Yeah.
Yes. Terrifying. The Alaskan bullworm is not intimidating, Sarah. Like, what are you doing? SJM, not your like most terrifying moment.
There is one question I've had about Under the Mountain that I've had this whole time. Why didn't Amren show up and just smite Amarantha? Is there an answer? Like, is there a reason that like
Amren?
Amren's supposedly like this otherworldly power. She wipes out so much of the armies when like Hybern comes. Why didn't she just show up and be like, Amarantha, you're gone? Was it just to keep Valeris safe? Was that like the main thing? Like Rhys is like, my charge is for you to stay here, guard Valeris, and she took it seriously. I always wondered that, because I know Rhys was stripped of his power.
Yeah, Amren is Rhys's second, so I think that she was like, okay, like she was in charge of Valeris then. But I do wonder, I don't know, this kind of gets into ACOTAR, but like whenever she unleashed herself, she used the cauldron to like break free of her body.
That is true.
So I'm like,
and she kind of like lost herself with that. And she wasn't ready to like sacrifice herself to that. That's true.
Yes. So I'm like, did she not have the power to? Did she not know? I don't know. But I think she was.
But they were all terrified of her. Like she was like low key terrifying to all of them. I feel like she could have, because like Rhys said, if I was at full power, I could have taken on Amarantha. And they said that the Night Court was not impacted by the blight. Yeah. So then why didn't Amren just be like, oh, well then I'll just show up and smite you? You know? I always wondered that. I have no idea. Maybe it's a plot hole. Maybe I'm missing something. If I am missing something, somebody tell me. Like, I want to know the answer. Mm-hmm. But it was just something I was thinking about during this reread. I'm like, and I feel like the Illyrians were super powerful and they could have taken... I just always wondered that. Was it just because Rhys said no? Because that could be, because his word is like, he wanted to keep Valeris a secret. He wanted the Night Court to keep a certain impression. So that could very well be it. But it's just, I don't know, one of my many wonderings.
I have also found, I don't know, this time I feel like I know the books pretty well. So I was able to kind of like, none of these theories are necessarily accurate, but I was able to kind of dream up like political situations based on what I know. And I was like, okay, so Amarantha like loved Tamlin, right? And Tamlin's dad like worked with Hybern. And so I'm like, Tamlin clearly was like fraternizing with these people and he claims to hate them, right? But then like knowing what we know about how the series goes, like I just don't trust Tamlin anymore. I think he's very cowardly, but I just don't trust his intention. He said, but like, because Farrah's dad's a prince merchant, and I feel like Tamlin was very much like, I just feel like there's a larger connection there that we didn't really get I feel like we didn't get as much information. Maybe there's more to come, but just wonder. Maybe. You know? Yeah. Did you get the riddle?
No, gosh, no. I am an exhausted reader. I'm a mom reading at 2 a.m. I am in the camp of they're going to tell us at some point or she's going to die. Like those are the two options. Actually, both happened. Plot twist. She got the riddle and she died. And then she was resurrected from a bunch of little fairy droppings. It's not the word. They gave them pieces of their power to restore her. Yeah. Fairy dropping. Can you tell I'm a mom that is cashed? Like I'm so tired right now.
We're spent over here.
Yes. Full disclosure, me and Bex are both physically, mentally, maybe spiritually spent right now. But we are here to give you our chaotic. Yeah, all of them. Any way that you can be spent, we have spent it all, but we're giving a little bit back to you guys. So any final thoughts, Bex?
The whole political portion of like the order in which they gave power really sets up the series for like ACOMAF, but then a lot of ACOWAR. So I'm excited to talk about that, like moving forward.
Honestly, me too. I feel like out of all the books, this is probably towards the bottom for me, like in terms of you're ranking the ACOTAR series of like favorite books. But I really enjoyed talking about it. Going back into Prithian again and just being back in this world is so fun. And Bex, thanks for doing this alongside me. I don't think I could do it without you.
Thank you. I'm so excited about it. Rereading them is like bringing me so much joy. So I just love Prithian the most.
And we're also planning to do episodes every 2 weeks. So once every 2 weeks, we're going to chat about the next book. Let us know what we missed, what we messed up, what you loved, what you agreed with. I'd love to hear it all in the comments. And please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all the things. And we'll see you guys back in 2 weeks for A Court of Mist and Fury. Bye, guys.